SparkVision, MaryBeth Hyland knows that extraordinary success is rooted in the vision, values, and culture crafted by purpose-driven leaders and their teams. With over a decade of experience built on knowledge from a Bachelor of Arts in Social Work from UMBC and a Master of Science in Nonprofit Management, she is known for her ability to guide individuals and teams to know, own, and live their values. And she does that with the understanding that we all have a deep desire to know and return to our most authentic selves at work, home, and within. As a certified mediator, mindfulness instructor, and values expert, she engages audiences and teams all over the world with her authentic style of facilitation, coaching, and empowerment. Her recent awards include being the youngest and fastest inductee into the Circle of Excellence, as well as an Innovator of the Year, Top 100 Women, Civic Engagement Leader, and Leading Women. She has also been recognized as a leading expert by the Washington Post, the Huffington Post, Forbes, the Wall Street Journal, and more. Her new book, Permission to be Human, The Ultimate Guide to Creating a Values-Driven Culture, is a step-by-step guide on how conscious leaders can create environments where their people and businesses thrive. It will be released this winter, and today we'll get a taste of what each of us can do to give ourselves and others permission to be human so we can all ignite our greatest potential. So with that, that sounds like exactly what we need right now, we thought. So I'm going to turn it over to MaryBeth, but before I do, just a few housekeeping items. Please be sure to keep your microphones muted. And if you have questions, feel free to pop them into the chat and we'll be monitoring them and making sure that your answers or your questions are answered. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Susan. It's such a gift to be with you all today and to know that hopefully we'll be ending this conference on a very high note together. And I am really excited because this is a wonderful opportunity for us to really tap in and tune into ourselves. And I know every time that folks take and invest the time in being in conferences like these, you emerge as a stronger leader. You emerge as someone with new tools and skills and possibilities for the environments that you're creating around you. And my intention with you this morning is to give you even more tools to add to that toolkit that I'm sure has gotten full over the last day. What I would love to invite you to do before we begin is, if you don't have your camera on and you're willing and comfortable to turn it on, I would really appreciate it. I'll tell you, as someone who's used to giving keynotes on stage and in live audiences, it can feel kind of weird talking to a bunch of names and you're not really sure if they're there or not. So I completely respect this. This topic is called Permission to be Human. I completely respect if you're not in a place where a camera on is good for you right now. So thank you. Oh, it's so good to see all your faces. Wonderful. Another request that I have as we move forward is that if something resonates with you, if something ignites a new thinking, share it with us. Share it with us in the chat box. That's one of these beautiful features of being in this online space now that we couldn't do in a live event. So if you have a story that comes up, if you have something that you're like, yes, I agree, or I haven't had that experience, it would be such a service, not only to yourself, but to everybody here for more connections being made that way. And just like Susan said, if you have questions, I'm going to do my best to monitor the chat throughout, but I'm also going to have some time at the end for formal question and answer. So know that whether or not we get to it in live, we will certainly have time at the end. And then I'd love to also invite you to use your reactions. Have you all used your reactions so far in this conference? So in case you're not familiar, Susan has her thumbs up. Yeah, Molly's got a thumbs up. Thank you, Dr. Manny. All right, Julie. So if you hear things that resonate with you, or it gives you some kind of an energy associated to it, let me know by showing a reaction in the reaction button. It really serves me in being able to do my best work with you this morning. All right, just in case anybody doesn't know the reaction button, it's all the way at the bottom of your toolbar here and then to the right. It just says reaction, and you can do some really fun things these days. So this morning is going to be about giving ourselves and our teams and our communities permission to be human. And this topic is so near and dear to my heart because it started when I was a really little girl. When I was just my earliest memories, I can remember looking to my mom and thinking that she was a superhero. Every single day she went into the workplace and she was healing people. She's now retired. She was the head of trauma disorders at Shepherd Pratt, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And she was the head art therapist. And over time, I got to experience some of her work firsthand. One of the things that has just an incredibly powerful memory in my mind was when she was working with a group of women experiencing homelessness and was creating a mural. So I'd love to know with the reactions, has anybody seen the mural across from the museum, the Modern Art Museum that is on Cathedral, and it is My Sister's Garden. I'm sorry, the Walters Art Museum. That's where it is. Anybody seen that mural, My Sister's Garden? Maybe, maybe not. Okay, well, if you're by the Walters Art Museum or even just driving by, next time you see it, hopefully you'll remember this story. My mom was creating this really beautiful, extensive piece of art with women who hadn't had work in quite some time. They were, as I said, experiencing homelessness. And part of what she was doing was creating not only an opportunity for them to express themselves, but a permanent installation in our community that represented them. It was called My Sister's Garden. And that was because every woman who was a part of this creation was making one flower within this garden. So it's a beautiful Baltimore scene of homes. And then there's this incredibly magical garden throughout that space. And every single flower that made up the garden was a representation of each woman who was hired to paint that mural. And I thought that was just so incredible. The women were asked, what makes you beautiful? And that is how they created the flower that would be in their garden. And as time went on, this was a pretty extensive project. And so I would come and help out. I was in middle school at this time, and just little things here and there. But one of the greatest things was when my mom, who again, I saw as a superhero, she asked me to be her sidekick. And she said, we are going to go to Nordstrom's Rack. Any Nordstrom Rack fans here? Yes, we are going to go to Nordstrom Rack and we are going to buy every single woman here a new professional outfit. Because at the Walters, that next day was going to be a debut of this mural. And they wanted to be sure that all the women felt the beauty that they had created externally, that they could feel that in the way they were showing up at this exhibit. And so my sister and my mom and I went to Nordstrom Rack and we ran around. We had a budget, but the idea was they needed something new to really make them feel special during this time. And that evening, when we went to the gallery opening, I was walking around, and none of these women knew me personally, but I felt such an incredibly deep connection to each one as they stood next to their flower and talked about what it meant to them, why they were beautiful. And I saw how proud they were. I saw how they represented themselves in these beautiful attire that really was a reflection of who they were on the inside. And that was my first taste of, that's what work is. That's what it means to work. And so I had this deep rooted feeling that work was 3 steps. 1, you go and you figure out what you're passionate about. Then you go and get a degree in that thing, so you have finer tuned skills in that area. And then the last step was that you found a job that ignited those passions and skills, that paid for your ability to have a sense of well-being outside of work. And you stayed there forever. It was one job. You just found the one and you were there forever. And during your time there, you developed this incredible work family. Because that's what my mom showed me, was what work was. So imagine how shocking it was when I went through that process and didn't have that experience. I had decided to go to UMBC, go Retrievers, and got my degree in social work. I then went on to get my master's in nonprofit management, and I thought for sure I was ready to go. I had my passion, I had my skills, I had the degree, and then the Great Recession hit. And that seemed like a really big deal up until 2020. But at the time, it was an experience of feeling like, I don't even know if I'm going to have a job. I did all the right things. I took all the right steps. What's going on? So I went through the process that everybody goes through in looking at all the openings, seeing what was possible that matched my checklist of necessities to feel a sense of purpose and belonging in those organizations. And I was so excited because even though we were going through this recession, there were so many opportunities that checked those boxes for me. Ignited my skills and passion, check. Was with a community of people that seemed to be in alignment with my beliefs and values, check. It was giving me an opportunity to make an impact in the community, check. It was an experience where I was able to pay off my loans, check. But then I'd go into those jobs, and it only took a few weeks to start feeling the disconnect between what was in the job description, what was in the interview process, what that experience and exchange looked like. And then once I was actually in the workplace and feeling like, this is not what I thought it was going to be. You all said that this was an environment that really cared and had the value of innovation. But when I came up with new ideas, I was told to really keep quiet because I was too new to be giving new ideas, right? I would be going into companies that really cared about transparency in the interview process, but then quickly found out that transparency was actually only for a certain level of people, and everybody else was just on a basis of maybe you'll find out, maybe you won't. And when this happened over and over and over again with different roles, I immediately internalized it and thought, something is wrong with me. There's something wrong with me, because why does this keep happening? I don't understand. There has to be something wrong with me, because I thought from everything that I had experienced in the past, that if I was working somewhere that ignited my passion and skills, of course I was going to have this lifelong career. Of course, I was going to create this family and community of people in my life that would be a part of it until I retired. And I learned very quickly that that was not the case for me. And I wonder if anybody here can relate to that experience. Coming in thinking it's going to be one type of environment or experience, and then finding later it was something completely different. I didn't know what was going on because my work was actually hurting my well-being. There were experiences where literally on Sunday nights, just thinking about going into the workplace, I would get physically ill. And I didn't understand, how could this keep happening? And what I know now that I did not know then is that each one of those environments were simply and completely a disconnect from my values. We as human beings are a walking, talking, living, breathing set of values. And what we don't always connect and realize is that our companies are too. The way that we have a meeting, the way that we engage in a conference, the way that we greet each other, the way that we develop relationships or don't. Those are all a reflection of the values of that organization. And values often are something that we not only experience, but we feel them. So the kind of thing where when you go into a company and you're really excited and you're feeling this great energy of connection and purpose and enthusiasm, it feels good. You really are in a good place. And then on the flip side, you can have experience like I just described, where you literally get ill thinking about those environments. That is a reflection of the culture. And here's the other thing that I learned is there is not one size that fits all. So just because one environment maybe wasn't a good fit for me doesn't mean that it wasn't a great fit for the people who were there. What's so key and critical and important that I've learned in this journey is that understanding my own values first and how they sync up or don't with the organization's values was a huge factor in whether or not that was an environment where I could stay, whether or not that was an environment where I could thrive. And this is an experience right now that is so big. It's such a big deal. 2020 was arguably the most historic year we've ever experienced on so many levels. And so much of this year has been about whether or not we've given ourselves and others permission to be human. Every single one of us has gone through experiences of grief. We've gone through sadness. We've gone through loss. We have gone through the intensity of everything. It's been a heavy, heavy time. And of course, there have been moments of lightness and joy and transformation and evolution and possibility and all of those incredible things that are on the opposite end of that. But what I found to be so critical during this time as I go in and work with companies is learning quickly whether or not they have given themselves and others permission to be human. And we're going to talk about some of those possibilities for you and for your teams, because it really starts with us. It really starts with us. Culture is made from two kinds of individuals: culture keepers and culture killers. And I probably don't need to go into too much of a description for you to know exactly what I'm talking about. If you know what I'm talking about, give me a reaction. I'm just curious to know, if without even having to explain, a culture killer or a culture keeper. All right. So a culture keeper, that is an individual who is making people feel a sense of connection, feeling as though they are not alone in this process, knowing that they can go to that person if they have something going on. It's also somebody who's doing a good job, right? They're really effective at their work, and they're helping others to be effective at their work as well when they need that support. They're people who are willing to look for the solutions and the possibilities. Whereas on the flip side, culture killers, these are the folks that make our stomachs a little queasy when we need to spend time with them, or we know that that's on the horizon, right? These are individuals who always have a lens on what's wrong and why something can't work. These are the individuals who are choosing not to honor the human experience and instead just doing whatever they need to do for them to be okay. And oftentimes, culture killers are not doing this because they want to create a bad environment. I highly doubt that anybody wakes up in the morning and says, I wonder how I could kill the culture a little more today. That's not the case. That's not the case. These are folks who are on their own internal journey of having stuff that they're going through. And unfortunately, it comes out, it seeps out onto others. And it also might be that they came from or have been in environments where it's been perfectly acceptable for that behavior to be normal and run rampant in the organization. You guys know what I'm talking about? The beautiful thing about this, though, is that you can go from a culture killer to a culture keeper. I admit personally that I have been a culture killer in the past. I've worked at an organization where gossip was considered really valuable information, and you got a lot of power when you would get in with the executive team and talk about people. And I felt like I was doing something good when I did that, because that was the culture that was being promoted. I thought I was doing something that was helpful. Until I really stepped back, it was like, whoa, that is not who I am. And why did I get swept away in that? It was that moment of realization that I have power to make changes. I have power to do things differently around here. And I have power to go to an environment that better serves me and my values. And that is something that is just so important to understand, is that every single one of us has the power to create and change the environments that we're in. But when we recognize that there is a really important understanding of what culture keepers and culture killers are doing or aren't doing, that is when we can start to get in deeper alignment. And this is so unfortunately true because we have a negativity bias as human beings. Your culture is really only as strong as the worst behavior that's tolerated, ignored, or gossiped about. We could have the best day and have the most amazing things going on, and then something really toxic happens to us and it wipes out all of the good stuff. Now, if you have mindfulness practices in your life and you do a lot of inner work, it doesn't have to do that. It doesn't have to do that. It can just be another moment in the day. But because of the way we're wired as human beings, unfortunately, our negativity bias typically takes over. And the thing we don't always recognize is that when somebody or a situation ignites stress inside of us, that stress does not just live inside of us. It is transferred to all the people we talk to. It's transferred to the people we live with. It's an experience where we oftentimes feel we need to talk about it because we need to vent, we need to get it out, right? And then unfortunately, that energy multiplies and other people start taking on that stress too. And these stats were the most recent stats that we could find that felt just incredibly powerful and important to recognize right now when it comes to these ideas of stress, right? We are feeling the most stressed that we ever have in the workplace. And so many of us are having mental health issues. I can say myself that I have gone through some of the most trying mental health times of my life this year. And fortunately, because of the organization I work for, which is myself and my partner, we have an environment where we talk about those things, where we take a day off, where we take a mental health break, where we tell our clients we need to reschedule because today is not a day that this is going to be possible. But as you can see here, it's very often that companies maybe say that the leadership is going to do something about it, but they don't actually follow through. This is all about permission to be human. As human beings, we all have these feelings and emotions in the workplace that are directly connected to our mental health. And as you probably already are aware, stress causes so many other things in our life. Memory loss, stroke, depression, shorter temper with others. This is especially big when it comes to the idea of transferring the energy to the people we're around in life, even early death. And these are the things that people are saying is creating the majority of that stress. These are all things that we have power over. When I work with organizations and we come in to understand what are the possibilities here that we can change the environment, that we can make some intentional shifts so that we are a people first culture, so that we are living in alignment with our values, so that we are activating our mindful leadership skills. These are the types of results that happen. And this isn't me as an individual human. This is overall, this is what we're seeing in the country of what happens when people engage in these types of practices. All of these important things are going down. I mean, how many people have had issues with sleep over the last year, right? And anxiety and needing to take off. And then as a result, there is proven now to show a 120% increase in productivity, which is so huge, so significant. When I go into companies, I use this formula: values times behavior equals culture. And we did a little bit of intel from all of the universities and colleges that are a part of this experience today. And these were the common values that came up across most of the organizations. It was really interesting because there was quite a few of the same. And one of the things that I think is the most incredible starting point when thinking about what can I do differently to give myself permission to be human, to give my team members permission to be human, to give our students permission to be human, is we start with your values. So what does community look like in a time when you know people are isolated? How do you shift? How do you live this value instead of professing it or simply having it on your website? How does diversity inclusion tie into your day-to-day culture when our entire country is finally waking up to the social and racial injustices? How do you give people permission to be human in those times? What does excellence look like when you move from being in the office and having no distractions to being a parent of multiple children who you're now homeschooling in addition to working your full-time job? What conversations are happening around what changes with excellence during this time? What about integrity, leadership, and respect? Simply knowing that we are all going through an intense experience. How do we use these as our tools for starting to ignite those conversations. I was having a planning meeting before we started this event, and there was a very powerful and vulnerable share that one of the organizers said, you know, I used to feel like I was so on it. I used to feel like I really had everything organized and in order. And now I feel like I can't even get the smallest things done the way I used to. And she was sharing just as a normal conversation as we were talking about what we were going to be going over here. And the other person in the conversation said, oh my gosh, you have no idea what it means to me to hear you say that, because I respect you so much. And I assumed you weren't having any of the same issues and challenges that I was having. In that moment, it was a really powerful pause for me, because a lot of times we assume that everybody else has it together except for us. And when we shut down, when we don't talk about it, when we hold it really close and don't want anybody else to know, that's when we wind up suffering silently even more. And the reality is, we don't have to do that. We don't have to do that. It is an experience where we simply and completely can be ourselves by saying, can we talk about what excellence looks like now? Can we talk about how and what shifts might need to be made for us to truly live this value and also be kind to ourselves during this time? It's incredible what can happen when we use these values, not just as something that lives as a piece of marketing collateral, but something that lives inside of us, something that we ignite, something that we are intentionally activating so that we can create a culture where people matter. I work with 2 organizations right now on a long-term basis, and there is an experience where they couldn't be more opposite. They both have the value of people first. As you can imagine, the whole concept behind that is this whole stuff that we're talking about, permission to be human, right? So their people are first. That's what they are saying. Both of these clients had me shift some of my work last year and do a series called Mindful Minutes, where over lunch, a couple days a week, for 15 minutes, we would do a guided practice, some kind of stress reduction, some kind of anxiety reduction, anything that would serve their people. In one of the companies, the first session had hundreds of people show up, hundreds. It was so exciting because I thought, this is going to really change their lives. This is going to make such a big difference. And all it takes is 15 minutes over your lunch break. And your company is supporting you. One of the organizations who had the hundreds of people show up the first time, I found out very quickly that they were told by many of their supervisors that sure, they could go to that if they needed that kind of thing. The other organization that we did the exact same thing had the CEO show up every single time. Imagine the difference in what message that sent. Sure, if you need that kind of thing, and I'm here, and I hope you will join me too. So what I'd love to ask you, if Becca can help me out with the poll, I want to know, and this is about meeting yourself where you are. This is not about judgment or anything like that. But I want to know, how are you doing? How are your teams doing? And this poll is also anonymous. So know that nothing will be recorded as you as an individual. Becca, are you able to launch the poll? All right, can you all see this? Just love to take a minute here to answer honestly. Do your values currently serve as a guide? Do you ground and align in your values to reduce your stress? Do you have intentional conversations with your team about how you will evolve in your values during this time? How are we doing, Becca? Are we ready to share the results?
Yep, we've got about 5 more people waiting to answer. We'll give you maybe 30 seconds.
All right. For everyone who's done the poll, let's just take a deep breath.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll, and the results should be shown on the screen.
Look at this. This is so inspiring. Oh my gosh. 49%. That is amazing. 49% of people are saying you are using your values as a guide. Incredible. And then we're saying that it looks like there's some opportunity here around reducing stress through your values. Wonderful. Now you know the opportunity exists. You can be the leader in that possibility. And it looks like there's a little bit about the same here on having intentional conversations. Having intentional conversations. That is really powerful, powerful stuff. I would love if there is one person here who has a compelling story of what their team has done, who said yes to any of these. Does anybody here have a short story that you'd like to share so that you can be an example for the rest of us here on what that looks like in your culture? You can go ahead and raise your virtual hand, or if you're more comfortable, you can put it in the chat box because we definitely want to know. All right, well, you keep thinking on it, and it's never too late to add it to the chat box. Because what I've found is that while I do this work in lots of companies and have lots of proven practices and all those things, what I find is that the people who are in our field, who are on the ground with us, they are the ones who can give us the best support and feedback on what works. So please, I hope that you will use each other as guides and resources should you feel called on this journey to go more deeply into your own permission to being human. And what's so powerful about these types of conversations, exercises, relationship development is that we can really go from a highly stressed, overwhelmed, disconnected place to a highly engaged, personalized, and creating an environment that has an incredible sense of belonging. And that can happen so quickly with just one conversation. But the reality is it has to be real. It has to be real. One of the worst things that you could do is go into a conversation like this with your team and then not follow through. Don't have the conversation at all if you're not ready to follow through. It's like how consultants like myself love sending out a survey, and then what do we do about it? Right? It's like people get so frustrated. It's like, why did I even fill out that survey? if you weren't going to do anything about it? So I ask that you really think about, what's my first step in my journey in that work? And what I'd love to do is actually invite us all. And if you're more comfortable turning your camera off at this point, you certainly can. I'm going to invite us all to do a guided visualization. It's not going to be quite a meditation because we're only going to take about 5 minutes here, but I'm going to guide you through a new possibility for yourself. So I'd love to know, just through thumbs up, has anybody here done guided visualization before, or anything, guided meditation, any kind of breathing practices? Awesome, quite a few of you. All right, so let's start by just uncrossing our legs if you're crossed, and put your feet flat on the floor. Just like we did a minute ago, start kind of rolling your shoulders and taking some deep breaths. And I want you to really look again, before we get into the practice, I want you to choose one of these values that intrinsically motivates you, right? Our values are things that intrinsically motivate us. Which one of these values, or maybe it's not on this list, it's separate from this list, but this is just to give you a primer to start. Which one of these would you like to be more intentional about bringing into your cultural norms as a culture keeper in your team? There's no perfect answer here. Again, this could be something here. It could be something that's not listed here. Just take a moment to choose what would serve you. Okay. And when you're ready, you can either just gaze down or close your eyes, whatever you're most comfortable with. And once again, you might want to give yourself a little stretch. Just tuning into your body. Feeling your feet flat on the floor. You can choose to place your palms up or down. Palms down means it would be meaningful for you to have some grounding. Palms up means it would be meaningful for you to have some lifting, some energy. So begin now by taking long, deep breaths through your nose. And know that whether you've done this a million times or this is your first time, you're going to do this exactly right. And that's because there's no right or wrong way to do it. Just start to notice the air coming in and out of the nostrils, going down to your belly and back up. And with every exhale, just feeling your body melt deeper into your own sense of comfort. Feeling your face soften. Feeling your shoulders relax. And just noticing any sensations in your body, just honoring that they're there. And if there's any noises where you are, just bring them in. No need to try to block them out. Just taking as long a breath as comfortable for you, but making sure it's a little more elongated than your natural flow. And perhaps you want to repeat to yourself on your inhale, I breathe in peace. And on your exhale, I breathe out stress. Inhale, I breathe in peace. Exhale, I breathe out stress. And on your next inhale, I want you to bring into your screen behind your eyelids. Just envision a normal day at work. What does a normal day at work look like? Really see yourself walking into this scene, going through the motions. Noticing what ignites a sense of energy and what might ignite a sense of depleting your energy. How is your energy impacting those around you? And now bring that value into the scene. This word that represents something that means so much to you. What does that value look like in your workplace? How does it fit in to your regular day? And now see a new possibility. What might you be able to do to ignite this value even more? Starting with yourself. How are you giving yourself permission to be human when it comes to this value? See yourself doing that. And now see how the energy changes around you. What possibility might exist when you truly embody this value? Notice what feelings come up when sensations show up in your body, just visualizing this possibility. And now allow the feeling of what might be in the best of ways. Flood your body from your head all the way down to your toes. And if you're comfortable, join me in placing your hands on your heart and bowing your head slightly, just honoring your own humanity, honoring the possibilities that you get to choose every day, that you get to create your culture around you. And when you're ready, you can slowly wiggle your fingers and toes. Bring your breath back to a normal pace. Maybe you want to blink your eyes open, but take your time. And for whoever is back with us, I'd love to hear from you in the chat. What value did you choose? What possibility did you see for yourself? Let us know. Let us all be inspired by that possibility. Community, wonderful. Very empowering. Value is diversity. Excellent. Respect. Yeah, that's a big one, especially starting with yourself. Respect for yourself. Community, several communities here. Integrity. Wonderful. Wonderful. Respect. Individuality. Thought about leadership and how I'm working on getting more involved in the leadership of one of our professional associations. Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you, Elizabeth. All right. So that was about 5 minutes of a practice. One of the things that I have found to be incredibly helpful in my own life is having these kinds of grounding moments. I encourage you that before you go into a meeting, before you start a conversation, before you change gears, you just take a moment to pause. You just take some deep breaths. You remind yourself of why this matters. Why this matters. It can completely change the energy inside of you. And then everybody else gets this wonderful possibility of their energy changing too. Because you gave yourself permission to be human first. And when you do that, you naturally give everyone around you that very same permission. And so if I were to ask you for something to do beyond this keynote, this is what I would ask. I want you to have 3 conversations. The first conversation is with yourself. With yourself. And answer these questions. How are we doing? How am I doing when it comes to living our values? What needs to change, evolve, shift in order for us to truly be grounded in these beliefs? What needs to be celebrated and lifted up as a proven culture keeper practice? And how can we give ourselves more permission to be human? Conversation 1 with yourself. Conversation 2, very same set of questions with your team. And conversation 3, again, same set of questions with your students. With your students. I promise you that if you have these conversations with the intention to do something about it, you will see a massive transformation in people's connection to one another, in connection to the work, and for their own leadership in really coming together during a time where it's really easy to feel separated. And with that, I have one final question for all of you that I hope you will answer deep inside of yourself. You know, I thought that my mom was a superhero in her work. And what I've learned is that she was a superhero because she gave people permission to be human. And it started with her giving herself that very permission. And so I want to ask each and every one of you, will you become the superhero in your worlds by starting with giving yourself that very same permission to be human? Thank you all so much. I have some time here to take questions. If anybody have questions, if anybody has something they want to share that came up for them, I would be delighted to answer them. And I'll also say, if you're not comfortable in this setting to ask your question, please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm super active on LinkedIn. And if you send me a private message, I will absolutely answer your question that way. So are there any questions? Thanks, Christine.
If anybody has a question, feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like before we close out. Well, while people are thinking, MaryBeth, I just wanted to say thank you so much for leading us in this very critical conversation right now. That permission to be human, to be vulnerable, and to really just kind of allow ourselves to not be perfect. I know that I certainly needed this message, and I could see in the chat a lot of other people resonated with the need for this conversation. So thank you so much. You're the perfect person to close out this 2-day conference for us. I know that I'm connected with you on LinkedIn, but if anybody else wants to connect with you there, wonderful. I do see a question. Can you see that, MaryBeth?
Can, yes. And thank you, Daniel, for the question here. So I'm seeing, have you seen mental health challenges come into these conversations when working with clients? Since it's not easily discussed either, I'm curious. Yeah, mental health is such a sensitive thing because there's still so much stigma attached to it. And so with my clients, we've done lots of different things. And again, it's culture to culture, organization to organization on how it varies. For organizations that are more established and the larger ones, we make a point that every time we have some kind of all staff gathering, we always put up all the resources for mental health support. So the insurance covers certain levels of mental health support. We also made it a point that people from those groups presented during all staff mandatory meetings so that it wasn't like, oh, do you want to sign up for the mental health meeting? So that people really knew that this mattered and that they had permission to access this and those types of things. Several of my clients have brought me on, increased the work to do more one-on-one coaching. So as I said, my background's in social work, so I'm certainly not a mental health professional, but do have casework as part of my background. And I'll tell you, it's really been intense. It's been intense because the people that I'm working with, like I have 3 people that I'm working with right now who their husbands died during this time. And I have several people I have a client that I'm working with right now who had to have emergency surgery and was working on her computer from her hospital bed like this when she came out of surgery. So there's a combination of mental and physical health, right? Like our bodies are the keepers of our souls. And when something's going on physically inside, it's our body saying, something's not okay here. Listen, pay attention, take care of me. And when we don't listen to that, when we shut that down, it takes over in such a bigger way. And so I think that there is really important conversations that need to be had with the HR community. If you have, I'm sure everybody here has HR, in how can we make sure we're providing this information and these supports without stigmatizing it, right? So that it's not a special thing if you go to it. That kind of goes back to that example I gave earlier of, well, if you need that kind of thing. We all need mental health support. Every single one of us do, right? Every single one of us do. If you're a human, you could use mental health support. I promise you. Yeah. So Corey, I'm seeing this. Any advice on how to encourage people to open up so there can be an ongoing and authentic discussion to the questions you pose? Yeah. So great question, Corey. So wonderful to see you. I have found that if this feels like, where is this coming from? Right? If this is like, this is not what we talk about around here, it's really easy to be able to say, I just came back from this conference and there was a really powerful concept that came up at the end where they gave us a bunch of questions to go through with ourselves and our team and our students. And I know this might be a little bit deeper than we typically go, but it's really important to me that I follow through because I want to see what might be possible here for us. I also want you to be comfortable and know that, we're going to have this conversation at meeting you where you are. right? Meeting you where you are. Because some people might not even understand what values are or what they mean, and that's totally fine. You can really just talk about it. One of the things that I love so much about values is that it's a common human language once you open the door. People often say, like, how come you're so passionate about values? And I'm actually not that passionate about values as much as I am passionate about the language that values provide us. Because when you talk about excellence, everybody has an idea of what that means. So a wonderful starting point too, if this feels like, oh, that's the deep end and we're not ready to go to the deep end, we need to start in the shallow end, just say, what does excellence mean to you? What does excellence mean to you? This is what it means to me. That can ignite an amazing conversation because you realize we all have different lens, a different way that we see and experience the world. And you can start to really understand each other more deeply in your human experience by simply asking, what does it mean to you? You could say, and what does it mean to you over the last year? How has that changed? Does that help, Corey? Okay, great. Yes, values can unite us. Beautiful. Well, I thank you again so much. This has been a real gift to be with you all. And I look forward to hopefully connecting with many of you on LinkedIn and continuing the conversation with whoever is interested.
MaryBeth, thank you again so much for your time and for your wisdom in this session. I'm going to turn it over to Alan to kind of close out the conference for us.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, MaryBeth. That's very helpful and very hopeful. And I think it will help a lot of us. And thank you to everybody for participating. The conference is actually